Yo, what's going on, E7 fam? Pat here, back for another version of Let's Talk About It, where we discuss current events around Epic 7. And today we're going to be talking about the Returning Heirs event, more specifically the special rewards for returning heirs. So for those of you who don't know, if you haven't played Epic 7 for 16 days or longer here, when you log back in, the game will give you some extra rewards to help you kind of catch up and make up for that lost time. And this is not something unique to Epic 7. A lot of other mobile games in the space do this. Genshin Impact does this. Nikke does this. Fate Grand Order does this. Arc Knights does this. So on and so forth. It is a way for the developers to kind of help you catch up. And honestly, I think it's a good thing for most games as it helps, increase the player base and provides a overall healthy and stable game. You definitely want to have more players coming into your game because the game will then grow and therefore you can expect bigger and better things. That's just naturally how the cycle of these things goes. Now, the reason we're discussing it is because a interesting Reddit post slid through my DMs last night titled Alt completed 16-day returner program and I'm kinda mad. So he talks about the rewards in this post, which I'll link down in this video's description, about everything that they got for completing the Returning Heirs event on their alt and showing off all of the rewards and stuff that they got in here, so on and so forth. So it got me thinking, okay, so what do you actually get for the rewards for being a returning heir, for not playing for 16 days and then coming back in? So first off, we have the 7-day check-in event, right? So if you haven't logged in for 7 days, you will receive all of the following: 10 leaves, a full set of speed gear that is level 88 at epic rarity, a potion of ascension, 4 Malagoras, 9 free covenant summons added to your daily for the next 7 days, essentially equating to 70 summons for a week as opposed to the 16 you would miss from not actually having logged in, netting you essentially 54 extra summons for having not logged in for essentially a little over 2 weeks. You also get an epic level 88 counter set that is 6 pieces and a random 5-star, right? And you might be thinking, well, maybe the gear isn't that good because some of us probably remember the 75 health set that you get at the start, 75 attack set. Those don't scale particularly well into the late game. But when you actually look at what you get, it's pretty good, right? So you have sort of Radiant Promise here, for example, 8% attack, 4 speed, 5 crit chance, 8% effectiveness. So it's like 1 off on attack, 1 off on speed, 1 off on crit hit chance, and 1 off on effectiveness. And effectiveness is kind of the odd stat out, the one you don't really want. But the thing is, it's still 37 equipment score, and that, honestly, that kind of matters quite a bit. Because most of the gear that you get from side events in this game is a level 78 with significantly lower equipment score. The piece of gear that you receive for the 5th year anniversary for Epic 7 was a 78 ring, which looks a lot worse in comparison to this 88 gear that you're actually getting. That is, again, 37 equipment score. And I keep talking about equipment score because higher equipment score means stronger gear. Stronger gear means better characters in this game. And I've helped out a number of new players and intermediate players on Discord and through DMs and people asking me. And when I try to help people re-gear their account and re-gear specific characters, some of the things I notice right away are that the strongest pieces of gear in Epic 7 on most players' accounts are going to be things like Ancient Inheritance gear, which is 42 equipment score to 41 equipment score if you look here, which is a little bit higher than 37. But the other huge bulk of their best gear is usually arena gear, like this Ravager's set that is the current arena set right now. And you'll notice that's 35 to 37 equipment score. So when we compare here, jumping back tabs, to the Radiant Promise set, this is all basically like as good or slightly better than the arena stuff. It's pretty high quality for the most part. It's not the best, but for the average player, this is going to be on par or potentially, depending on how it rolls, even better than some of their best gear. It might not be their best gear, but it will be amongst their best gear. And that is honestly pretty strong. You look at the counter set gear here as well, it's all 37s. Again, pretty much perfect subs. You get the speed boots, which are highly desirable. If you've watched my no hunt runs in the past, speed boots are really hard to come by. The game doesn't really give them out too often. So here are speed boots with, for the most part, nearly perfect bruiser subs, right? Again, you could potentially get all effectiveness and it wouldn't work out too well for a tank or a bruiser, but then it would be really strong as like a potential off piece on a debuffer or like something like a counter Sharoon, for example. So they're usable pieces of gear is what I'm getting at here, right? And for most people, again, it's going to be as good or slightly better even potentially, or slightly worse than some of the best gear that they already have. For the average player. I'm not talking for somebody like me who's a content creator who's like in the higher tiers of Emperor, for example, right? Like, I am not the standard average player. I make up a very small percentage of the player base. The average player, from my eyes, from what I see, from who I interact with in the community, their gear is not as good as this, and on average, right? Like, this is just really strong gear overall. On top of that, independent of the gear, you also get for 2 weeks 30% extra XP on all of your characters. So in case you're trying to level up new characters, 30% more gold, have access to all the spirit altars for 2 weeks, and you also get free unequip for everything. So you get just a ton of experimentation with your characters. There's also an exclusive pack, which we're not going to talk about right now. You get the Potion of Ascension, like we already said. You also get a special event that is unique to you. I don't know all of the rewards because I don't list them all here. But if the Reddit post is to be believed, along with this DM that I also was sent, I don't know exactly who posted this, but this is basically like in total, if it's to be believed again, so take it with a grain of salt. If it's to be believed, this is essentially what you're walking out with if you decide to undertake the returning player event. You'll get 6 Malagoras, more than you would had you played for the entire 16 days. You will get 2 free 5-star units, one from obviously the returning thing, as well as I guess presumably the event. You will get the 2 sets of gear that we talked about. You will get 54 more summons than had you played the entire 16 days. You'll get the Ascension Potion. You'll get 3 mod gem boxes, and then you'll get the boss that we talked about. Although it does note here that there is a Hunt and Spirit Altar and double AP buff. I cannot confirm that from just reading the patch notes, but presumably that is what people are saying that have tried it on their ult. And now the big kicker, and I'll post that up on the screen now, is when asking other content creators, is this thing repeatable? The answer is yes. You can actually stop playing Epic 7 for 16 days, come back, collect all these rewards, then stop playing for 16 days again, and then come back again, and so on and so forth. And you can just keep picking up your returning gear here. If we scroll back up here, you could just essentially keep coming back and getting the Radiant Promise set over and over again. And that's going to raise, obviously, some really serious red flags, I feel like. That is definitely going to be something that they're going to look at long and hard, because I don't think it's quite the best look to have your player base potentially coming and going every 2 weeks in order to farm this set. Because the goal is to give you stuff to help you want to play the game, right? Epic 7, play the animation. You want to increase player retention. That is the whole point of a returning player event. So the logical thing to do would be to nerf the rewards that you get from the returning user check-in event, right? That would be the natural conclusion. Well, I'm going to argue no. I don't actually think it's wise to nerf the returning actual event. So if we go over to this tab here, this was a controversy on our Gacha Gaming, which, it's a subreddit if you've been here before. This was a controversy that other Epic 7 content creators have talked about recently, and I know that Mango, I believe, was one that talked about it, but there's this thread called "Got Baited and Tried Epic 7 for a Week Plus," and I'm not gonna read through the whole thing, but for the most part, it is essentially people just complaining about a lot of the worst parts here of Epic 7. I will link it down in the description below. But the main takeaway from all of it that a lot of people are agreeing with in this thread is that gear RNG is just way too damn high in Epic 7. And I'm kind of inclined to agree with them. So when you think about a piece of gear in Epic 7, there is a 1/3 or 1/4 the chance, depending on your hunt, that when a piece of gear drops, that you can actually use it. So like if you're looking for speed gear, there is a 2/3 chance it's unusable off the get-go because it could be crit or hit for the most part. And yes, you could use those on other characters, so it's not the end of the world. But if you were looking for a speed set ring, for example, if you happen to find a speed set ring, 3/8 of the time, it is dead on arrival because there are 3 main stats that it could have: flat attack, flat defense, or flat health. That would just be a non-starter if you got one of those as the main stat. So a little less than half of all pieces of gear that are on the right set and the right piece are just insta-dead before you even basically look at the actual subs. Of the actual sub stats you could get, 3 of them, again, flat stats here, are for the most part undesirable. They are just way worse than any other piece of gear, right? You also have 2 set substats in effectiveness and effect resistance that don't really synergize with most of the roster when both of them are paired together. You have oddball cases like Sharoon, for example, that wants both ER and effectiveness, but for the most part, most of the roster doesn't want it. So if you see those 2 in tandem, that's again, for most players, for most things, a non-starter. It is just dead on arrival, right? On top of that, substat values, as we've talked about in the new player equipment guide, can be high or low, and you obviously want higher stats than lower stats. So even if you find the right set, the right piece, the right main stat, if all of the stats are low, then it's not going to be a really strong piece. The equipment score is just not going to add up to, say, the free gear that you get from the returning player event. So yeah, it's a lot. And if you look at other competitors in the space, the mobile gaming space, you can look at a game like Nikke, for example, where characters only have 4 slots with fixed main stats on all 4 slots, and there's only 3 possible substats. That's a significantly less amount of RNG. That game is almost a year old at this point, and even me, who's somebody who's been playing almost since day one, I still don't have a perfectly fitted character with the correct subs in that game. And that's a game like Epic 7 where you need a pretty big roster. So that game has far less RNG, and it still feels like it's a lot. But at least it feels a little bit more manageable, at least when we're talking about math, from a math perspective, than Epic 7. There's just so many more variables from Epic 7. So, yes, taking the sure thing and not playing for 2 weeks in the face of such, RNG, so much variance, it might sound appealing to other players. So the logical thing is, because it's repeatable, because it's high quality gear, because it's guaranteed, because it's on the 2 best sets in the game, naturally I think people are going to say, nerf it. But the thing is, if you nerf the returning player rewards, it has a damaging effect, I feel like, on the game as a whole, right? So now, it might not be worth it to come back to Epic 7 as a returning player because the rewards just aren't really that great. For example, Fate Grand Order as a returning player gives you like 120 summons almost, which in Epic 7 terms, that doesn't seem that impressive, but if you've played Fate Grand Order, that's like almost a whole year's worth of summons. That's pretty insane, and that is a pretty good way to encourage somebody to come back to your game because you're basically giving them almost like a year's worth of stuff for free to come back and play the game. So By nerfing the returning user check-in event, you make user retention lower as a result, which I think is not something you really want. It also lends further into our gacha gaming thing that we talked about, the perception that Epic 7 is just too difficult of a game to play in 2023 in its 5th year. The RNG is just simply too high. And again, if you've been paying attention to content creators in the space, I know Carr has already covered it, but you have other channels that just are generically talking about mobile games, not necessarily just like me who only talks about Epic 7, or you have other content creators who might only talk about, other competitors such as like Honkai Star Rail. I'm talking about a generalist in the space talking about mobile games. I know, again, Carr covered this on his last video, or at least one of his more recent videos. You have a channel like FG3000 talking about his favorite games from this past year, and I'll just let him speak for himself.
One game on my list, and my favorite mobile game new release of 2023 is Outer Plane. Yes, bootleg Epic 7, aka Epic 7 but with better characters. Yeah, I said it, but that could be argued. Epic 7 with just better voice acting. I ain't taking that argument. Outer Plane is the truth. Epic 7 with a better, more easily understandable daily gameplay loop. That sounds like a skill issue. Epic 7 with basically the same combat. Epic 7 that's just new and I don't feel left behind.
Left behind, he says. And I don't want that to be the public perception of Epic 7. I don't want that to be the perception of the people on that Reddit thread or the people in the comment section of that video or just in the gacha / mobile gaming space in general. I think Epic 7 is something truly special amongst all of the mobile games that are currently on the market. I love this game. It's the reason why I make content for this game. But this, call it whatever you want, exploit, oversight, whatever we're talking about with this returning user check-in event, it does raise some serious questions about what are we going to do about it in the future? What is Smilegate going to do, and what, as a community, should we ask for from this game that we all love? Because I think nerfing this event is actually the wrong way to go about it, because it further reinforces that bad public perception that some have of the game, that the game is too difficult for a new player. It's just too much, and they don't want to be a part of it. They want to seek other alternatives, whether that is Outer Plane or otherwise. And then on top of that, nerfing it just punishes the players that return in the first place, which doesn't help with player retention, doesn't help with, anything, any growth metric you want. It's just a bad look, I feel like, for the game. So what I would like to see is this be the first step towards a conversation about perhaps making the game a bit more accessible for players in our 5th year going into the year 2024. I really think that we need to take a good hard look about how long it takes to gear characters, how gear rolls in this game. I feel like it simply just needs to be less time consuming to actually play the characters that I like, that I think are fun, that I think are cool, the things that I think make Epic 7 Epic 7. One of the most frustrating parts of Epic 7 is pulling a character that you really like and realizing you don't have any gear to play them. So you spend weeks, maybe even months, trying to get the pieces together just to have a usable version of that character. And by then, several more have come out at this point. And at the end of the day, at least if your box looks like mine, you have a ton of characters that you really think are cool and you want to play, but the gearing system sometimes just doesn't let you do that. So in the face of something like this, a sure thing with the returning users check-in event, I can understand why some people that I was talking to today were thinking about taking the plunge and going for it, because again, it's a sure thing in a game with so much variance that there's no such thing as a sure thing. So, how do you all feel about this issue? Do you think that we need to nerf the returning user check-in event rewards? Should it take longer for you to have access to those rewards. Do you think it's time potentially for us to overhaul the gearing system in Epic 7? Do you wish it was easier than it is right now? Or do you think everything is just fine the way it is? I would love to know all of your thoughts and comments down below. Please, please, please. Want to hear everything on this issue. As of the time of me recording this, a lot of people are starting to talk to me about how they're all going to make videos about this. So I don't know how big this issue will be. I don't know if it'll blow up. But time will tell if this is a turning point for the game or if things just continue on the status quo. So again, I would love to hear your feedback and everything down in the comment section. As always, enjoy the rest of your day, the rest of your week, and I'll catch y'all in the next one. Bye-bye now.